Howdy, it's John, and it's time for Voice of the Mesh September 2025 edition. It has been a very interesting month with Defcon and the security issues that you probably heard of related to that. Of course, now we have officially supported hardware, or is it that we now officially have community supported hardware? We'll dig into that. But before we jump into those blog entries, there's a lot of interesting news in hardware. A just ton of new nodes out on the horizon that are going to be really interesting to look for, along with fun videos on YouTube that feature Meshtastic and some really great community projects to cover as well. So let's get rolling right into the blog. At the beginning of August, we had a blog entry titled Updates to Supported Hardware. And this really is a blog entry all about formalizing officially supported versus community supported devices and streamlining documentation, flasher support, so on and so forth. I think this is really important for everyone who's really into Meshtastic to understand. I am going to read a couple of important sections from this blog entry for those of you who have not read it yet. And as usual, if you haven't read these, you probably should. The article starts talking about officially supported devices. Devices in this category are those that manufacturers have chosen to support through participation in the Meshtastic backer and partner programs. These devices receive official support from the core Meshtastic team and are included in all key tooling, the web flasher, documentation, client apps, and other areas. So in effect, everything that you saw on the flasher and on the website was, for all intents and purposes, now, quote-unquote, officially supported. Of course, that does seem to be changing. The article goes on to read, devices that are no longer actively supported by the manufacturer or do not have backing through our support programs will move to the community-supported category. What does that mean? Firmware for those devices will continue to be built and made available through the GitHub releases. The core Meshtastic team will no longer provide direct support for these devices. Support will be provided by the community. Some devices will be removed from the web flasher, though this will happen gradually to give the community time to adjust. Devices will be moved to a new community-supported section in documentation. And finally, in the client app, devices will be labeled as either officially or community-supported. The latter, devices will no longer display device images. So that last part is very trivial. It just means that there won't be pretty pictures. I don't think anyone's super upset about this. Probably the biggest point here that I think will scare people will be the web flasher removal. That seems like the most concerning item on the surface, but I honestly think that it isn't a huge deal. First off, if you're not super tech savvy, you should just get an officially supported device and then you're golden. Problem solved. Also, realistically, for NRF52 devices, it doesn't matter. You generally just double tap the reset button. They go into DFU mode anyways, and then you can download the file from GitHub. The hardest part will be just making sure that you have the right file. So it will take slightly more work than before, but not a huge amount. I also suspect that the community will cover this gap fairly quickly, as providing an alternative flasher will not be a huge technical challenge, especially since the flasher is open source. I think the community will figure out how to put some of these things together, put together a better community-supported flasher something or other. The article does note that the Meshtastic team currently supports over 100 devices. And that's not really surprising. This sort of change was always bound to happen. It's impossible to maintain support for hundreds of devices for free. They're going to need to pare it down to just that which manufacturers are going to pay for. I presume that there is some sort of licensing fee in the back end, one of those for every 1 unit sold, the manufacturer is going to pay a $1 fee to Meshtastic Solutions for this quote-unquote backer/partner program. I'm not sure what the actual values are, if it's $1 or 10 cents or whatever, but some amount per unit sold will be kicked back to the Meshtastic Solutions group to pay for the developers to fix the things. And the net result is, I believe that this will provide a better product for anyone using a supported device. The manufacturers will have a direct line to getting issues fixed with the Meshtastic team, and the Meshtastic team will be getting money, which means paid development time to fix said issues. If there are enough devices being sold, then they can hire more people or pay for more freelance developers to fix more issues. Honestly, as Meshtastic slowly acquires more mainstream support, and by that I mean mainstream public randos on the sidewalk support, donations will not cut it. Most people don't donate to open source projects. Even the people who are savvy with open source don't donate. It will really not be surprising when your mother doesn't donate to them, and she ends up taking a lot more support time to make sure that all of the applications and the devices work really, really well, really, really easily. This is all a virtuous feedback loop. The software continues to get better, which sells more units. The manufacturers make more money. They give more money back to Meshtastic. And overall, that means more paid development time to make the Meshtastic project better. And yes, it will still improve things for community-supported devices because the apps will be getting better. The overall platform will be getting better. I think this is a good thing. And we knew that something like this was coming ever since they announced Meshtastic Solutions quite some time ago. So the second blog entry was titled That One Time at Defcon. And let me say up front, this is a very lengthy and technical blog write-up. I cannot possibly try and summarize the entire thing. If you are interested in security things, you should definitely read it yourself. If you're a passionate Meshtastic user and want to understand this security issue that you might have heard about, read the blog entry. It's very enlightening. But the summary for those of you who won't read it is that Meshtastic was deployed at Defcon via an event-specific firmware, like we did at OpenSauce, like has been done at Burning Man in the last week. And there were over 2,000 nodes once again on the network. Another big weekend for Meshtastic, another proof that it really can scale up to big numbers. But a security vulnerability was found. And I read, quote, "During Defcon, a security researcher replayed modified node info messages at scale. This technique is only possible when pre-shared keys are known by an attacker." And a secondary quote, "This was the first time that this type of attack has been observed on an active Meshtastic network." And now, the important part is to understand how Meshtastic works. And I'll read once more, a short quote. "Meshtastic operates using trust on first use model. This is also referred to as tofu. And this is super common. A lot of systems today operate in a tofu or tofu-like mechanism. SSH, Secure Socket Shell, even secure messaging apps like Signal and WhatsApp operate with this similar tofu. What it really means is that you receive a set of encryption information and you trust that the information that you've gotten is valid on that first use. That is why most of these applications, like Signal, like WhatsApp, recommend that when you care about encryption and privacy, when you care that you are talking to the right person and it is properly encrypted, that you check with them through alternative means to verify that you have the correct encryption. And in some systems, this is like cute little emoji pairs and stuff like that, or, some short summary of letters and numbers. But in order to establish trust, you have to either do it the first time you run into a situation or through some secondary means of communications. With Meshtastic, you can get your public keys and share them with other people through a QR code. In fact, in the Bay Mesh, they created a node contacts channel where people can share their encryption keys so that you can know and trust that you are talking to the person on Discord and on the air. Again, this article goes on in great amount more detail. There's a public write-up of the finding. There are patches, fixes, and mitigations that have been rolled out to Meshtastic through the firmware. At the end of the day, the most important thing to remember, this type of attack affects public meshes or quasi-public meshes, in that it is a mesh that the encryption key has been given out to a lot of people. If you are running a private mesh with your dozen friends or whatever, and no one else has the encryption key to, then there is no chance of being hacked. And I'm doing air quotes here, which you can totally see in this podcast medium. It's not a hack, but it's a impersonation attack. So that is everything from the blog. And then we switch over to the firmware, which there was in the last month, 2.74, 75, 76, and 2.77 released. 2.74 had at least a page and a half of bug fixes alone. There were tons of bug fixes in the other versions too. A lot of the work that you saw post Defcon was related to spoofing resilience work and other security mitigations. Again, if you want to know what they did, read that previous blog entry. It goes into the technical details. There were only a couple of highlights from the firmware that I wanted to pull out. The first is some new hardware support, which is the TDEC Pro, the ThinkNode M5, Washtastic, and T-Echo Lite all have gained full support, and I will talk about all of that hardware in just a moment here. The last one is there's a start of support for the RAC 6421, which is a new Raspberry Pi related rack whiz block. And I can also talk about that right now in the hardware section. First is the TDEC Pro. The TDEC Pro is not new. It's been out since May, but it was not Meshtastic compatible until now. This is one of those weird things with the TDEC, with LilyGo and their naming. The TDEC Pro is pretty different from the previous iteration of the TDEC. They are the same insofar as they have a screen and a keyboard, but the TDEC Pro now has a e-ink display, so that should lead to a better battery life. Unfortunately, it's still ESP32 and a 1400 milliamp hour battery, so you're looking at a day of battery life at most, and I mean like 8-hour day, not 24-hour day. The TDEC Pro also includes a 4G module and an AI smart sensor, but I doubt either of those are supported in Meshtastic currently. I'm going to be honest though, the one thing I do like about LilyGo is they've recently pivoted to a new all-transparent case scheme for a lot of their devices. It's very 90s retro, and I am 100% on board with it. Also from LilyGo is the T-LoRa pager, which has kind of a sidekick vibes, again, throwing back to, 20 plus years ago. It is another ESP32 based device with a small e-ink display. It has a QWERTY keyboard that's not the same as the TDEC. It looks like it's a little bit smaller. Overall, it's a much smaller form factor than the TDEC Pro, much more pocketable. I like the look of it. I don't think I would want to type out many super long messages, but if you are looking for something small that maybe a kid could have as a standalone device, this looks like it has some real potential. It's not fully supported yet, but the firmware work is well underway, and it should be rolling out in the next couple of versions. I just felt it was worth mentioning now, since there's so much from LilyGo right now. Their third node that is, again, fully supported is the T-Echo Lite. This is another pager-style device in that it is very small. It's a little square with an e-ink display, and it's an actual pager-style device in that there is no keyboard, just a small display. Unlike the other two nodes that I mentioned, this one does utilize an NRF52 to go with that e-ink e-paper display, so it'll probably have a very good battery life, though being a very small form factor, it's going to have a smaller battery to go with it. From Elecro this month, we have the ThinkNode M5, which, best I can tell, it is identical to the M1 in basically every respect and basically every feature. It has the same form factor. The case looks identical. The only difference is the new M5 uses an ESP32 instead of the M1's NRF52. They even kept the same 1200 milliamp hour battery, and that's where it breaks down, because with the M1, you had a couple days of battery life, and with a much more battery-hungry ESP32 on this new ThinkNode M5, you're, again, going to be looking at like maybe a day, 8-hour day, and it's the same $54 price tag. I get it's easy to make both the ESP32 and NRF52 versions, but I don't know why. It just confuses the market, in my personal opinion. From the community, but sold on Elecro, is the Washtastic by Valzoo. That's their username on Reddit, at least. This is a very cool NRF52 based node that has a full 1 watt radio in it. Not only does it have a battery hookup, it has variable power input that accepts anything from 5 volts to 28 volts. So that could be any power source up to 28 volts, but notably that this is probably a really good thing for solar. You could hook up some chonky 12-volt solar panels, charge this radio with a decent size battery, and have it last off-grid for quite some amount of time, which is going to be really necessary when, again, operating with a full 1 watt radio. Now, again, if you're in Europe, the 1 watt radio is totally useless to you. This is only useful in places where 1 watt is allowed, like the United States. But I love seeing more full-powered units be on the market. I will note that, unfortunately, for as long as I've been watching it, the Washtastic has been sold out on Elecro. It is $85 list price. We'll just have to wait and see when we can actually get one. Last month, I was talking about the rumors of the WizMesh tag from Rack Wireless, and this month it is officially announced. So we have the Rack Wireless and Moco Smart WizMesh tag. As noted previously, it has a 1000 milliamp hour battery. It uses a Semtech SX1262 LoRa chip. It's NRF52 based, has GPS, an acceleration sensor, all the things that you would expect to see. And it looks like a luggage tag. There are actual pictures available online now at Rockland and Rack Wireless. Again, I really think they went with the name WizMesh tag because it looks like a baggage tag, which I'm not against. It's definitely going to be a competitor for the Seed T1000E. I look forward to getting my hands on one, but the proof is going to be in the radio reception pudding. Finally, from Rack, we have, I mentioned in the firmware section, the Rack 6421, which is a alternative baseboard designed to be a Raspberry Pi. And now, when looking this up, I actually found that there were 5 different devices listed on Rack's website. And now, this time, this is their public website, so this will be linked. None of these have prices. There are no pictures or any details. I'm basically telling you everything that I have publicly available for them. The first unit is going to be that baseboard Rack 6421 adapter for the Pi. The second is the Rack 1971-3 standalone Meshtastic node adapter. And the description is compact LoRa module for Meshtastic with plug-and-play USB or Pi-Hat support. So I think the 19713 unit is the actual radio, CPU, whatever it is. The previous Rack units that we have dealt with, they have that separate baseboard and they have that little system on a chip. And the system on a chip is actually the Semtech wireless, the LoRa wireless, a Bluetooth wireless, and your NRF52 CPU. So I suspect the Rack 19713 drops the CPU since you don't need it when it's plugged into a Raspberry Pi. My hope is that they will use this as a chance to increase the power on these units to 1 watt or similarly improved values. The Rack units are so great, but I just really wish they were more powerful. They would be vastly more useful to me if they were more powerful. Item number 3 on the list is the Meshtastic Gateway All-in-One. It's described as a Raspberry Pi plus LoRa plus sensors pre-integrated with Meshtastic and MQTT Broker, ready for plug-and-play deployment. Pretty self-explanatory for anyone that wants a gateway all in one. It's done and ready to go. And that's going to be great for people who want to set up Meshtastic and don't quite necessarily have all the skills to put everything together today, or don't want to go to something like a FemtoFox, which, again, I have nothing wrong with the FemtoFox. I love it. It's wonderful, but it does require a little bit more patience since it's a little bit slower. It's focused on being a very low power in terms of power consumption unit, even though it can operate at 1 watt. And again, that's why I want these Raspberry Pi nodes to operate at 1 watt. Item number 4 is the Meshtastic Hybrid Router Multi-Protocol. This is a Raspberry Pi, the Rack 6421 baseboard, plus LoRa, which is, I think, the 19713, plus optional LTE/Wi-Fi Halo. And the description is versatile field router for running Meshtastic and MQTT services. I'm not sure how this differs from the gateway other than it adds the optional LTE or Wi-Fi Halo. Again, it's a very cool idea. There is a number of places where we could have used in the Bay Area a MQTT gateway that was not at someone's house, like at a mountaintop where it gets a lot better reception. Maybe this is the answer. We shall have to see what it looks like when these come out, and also what the price tag is and the power consumption, etc. I suspect that some of these might be in a form factor similar to the Nebra helium miner. They will use not just a regular Raspberry Pi, but a compute module. And in fact, there is the number 5 item on the list, the WizMesh Pod, which is a portable touchscreen tablet with CM4 plus battery plus rack 19713. And the description says, runs MQTT Broker and Meshtastic Router locally, ideal for field diagnostics, range testing, or mobile dashboard. High gain antenna and sensor support. I'm really interested to see if the WizMesh Pod is a CyberDeck, or at least a good basis for a CyberDeck. Add an SDR to it for non-Meshtastic use cases, and this could be really cool. Also, really quickly, a shout out to whomever at Rack heard my previous podcast. In researching these components, I once again stumbled across your staging of sales website. And no, I was not trying to find it. I just was in the search results, and now it's password protected. So excellent work. No more early reviews of data for me. From the rest of the web this month, I am going to start with a couple of YouTube videos. The first is one that has made the rounds from Save It for Parts, titled I Hit a Meshtastic Node Somewhere in Alaska. And it's exactly as described. Most of the video is him building it, and then a few shots of him deploying it and some hints as to where you might be able to find it. Apparently, if you're on a cruise through Southeast Alaska, you may be able to hear from the node. Most people will not have a chance to go find it, but it's a fun idea. I have not seen any posts yet about anyone who has found it. The other video is from Electric Ranch, whom you may also know as Scotty from Strange Parts, titled No Cell Service, Can Meshtastic Save Us? So if you're unaware, Scotty has moved to a ranch in the wilderness somewhere, and they are off-grid. And insofar as there is definitely no cell phone service, they use Starlink for internet, so on and so forth. And every time that he has talked about trying to communicate and radios, he did a video about this $800 dog collar that he uses to track his dog. Basically, every video he has posted, people comment, hey, you should check out Meshtastic. And well, fortunately for him, there was this cool thing called Open Sauce recently where he stopped by the booth and he had a 10-15 minute conversation between himself and his team with us working the booth. And apparently we did a good job convincing him to give it a try, as he bought a TDuck Plus and a Seed T1000E, and he tries them out on his property. I think this is just a great little video because it's a very realistic look at I'm trying this out, and how does it work, and where does it work, and when does it work, and when doesn't it work? Because there's no magic to radio, as most of you probably know. Height is might, but as soon as you go over that backside of the hill, it doesn't work so well. Hopefully he deploys Meshtastic, puts out some repeaters. In his video, he said that he has ideas for more and potentially building some infrastructure out there and providing devices for his guests so people can communicate while they are out amongst the ranch. I think it'll be a really interesting series because it's Meshtastic as it's designed to be used off-grid, not we're here in the Bay Area and we have nodes sprinkled through the Bay Area just because we can. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but Scotty is actually trying to use it correctly. Now for our final section of the day, and that would be around the web. Not necessarily just socials, a lot of that, but the first is from Hackster, and there is currently, it's sponsored by Seed, a Meshtastic device design challenge with Seed Studio and Meshtastic. It's a total prize pool of $7,000 plus using the new Seed WEO Tracker L1 series development kits. Basically, can create a project with an L1 and submit it. And if you win, there are prizes. There are prizes for second place, I think 2nd through 10. I just wanted to highlight importantly, every proposal that gets put forward will get a 30% discount from Seed Studio for the device purchase. I'm not saying that you should abuse this, but if you have any sort of concept of building something with an L1 and you want one, now is the time to submit that proposal and get a 30% discount code, because when else are you going to get 30% off? Their list price is not super expensive, but every little bit helps today, right? Important to note for the future, this competition closes September 25th, 2025. So you have 2.5 weeks by the time this actually gets published. Next is a Medium article titled Send Messages to Meshtastic from Your PC or Home Assistant or Anywhere by Tris Phillips. This is a really interesting project to use MQTT uplink and downlink to get messages from Meshtastic in and out of Home Assistant relatively easily. I will note though, before you read this, please don't do this on a public mesh without safeguards and checking with your public mesh people. Typically, MQTT downlinking is frowned upon by many because bad things can happen if you set it up wrong. But if you're doing this on a private mesh, go crazy, have fun. It's fairly simple as far as when you start talking about things like MQTT and Home Assistant, so on and so forth. If you understand what all that means, it's a simple enough setup. One of the examples that Tris puts out there is sending weather data to your mesh that you have in Home Assistant from something else, potentially triggered by some automation. I gotta say though, having spent a lot of time with the Python API and the Meshtastic CLI recently, I think a better solution would actually be to hook up a node to your Home Assistant box and make an intermediary layer between Home Assistant and the Meshtastic CLI or the Python API. So that way you could send messages directly via your node rather than necessitating the use of MQTT. Not that there's anything wrong with MQTT, just you can get all of this data just by hooking your node directly up and using the existing APIs. But still, really cool little project. There was a post on Twitter from Joel Telling, aka the 3D printing nerd, asking for help on Meshtastic related things. Unfortunately, I don't use Twitter anymore, so I can't see any of the conversation about it. But if you feel like playing in the Twitter sphere, or sorry, X, you can check out what he has to say and see if you can help. He tagged Jeff Geerling, so he may have all the help he needs. From Reddit was a post titled Long Range Indoor Node in Urban Environment by user WizToff, I think. It's W15T0FF. I think that's supposed to be WizToff. I thought this was an interesting take on an indoor node because they're using transparent acrylic to, instead of hide their Meshtastic node, give it like an industrial chic look. Yes, obviously, take node, put outside, put on roof is best option. But if you live in an apartment complex or similar, that's probably not an option. I have friends who live in apartments and they do not have a choice of mounting their Meshtastic nodes on their roof. And even living close to me, we cannot get messages through because your standard handheld antenna or that on the T1000E, which is amazing, but it cannot defeat multiple cinder block walls. So this is an interesting option. I think that this person should have used a Station G2 instead of a rack whiz block, but that's just because I'm biased to how amazing the Station G2 is. There was a post titled, I connected 2 drones with Meshtastic by Data Slayer 2. And the title is fairly self-explanatory. They posted a little video where they connected 2 drones, which each had a Meshtastic node on them, and tested out to see how it works. It's nodes on a drone. Apparently, they got about a 5-mile range on it, which honestly, I'm surprised it's so little. They probably could have gotten significantly longer. Maybe that was just as far as that they had. But it's fun. We have definitely tried that in the Bay Area a few times. Height is might, along with line of sight. So if you can get that node up high, if you can get it more visible, it will significantly improve your range. Unfortunately, with a drone, you're talking about a maximum of 45 minutes. So this might be good for a quick pop-up, send out an emergency broadcast or get some messages out. But the only times I could see this being useful is some sort of emergency disaster scenario where you might not have a drone. You probably shouldn't be flying a drone. If there are other aircraft in the area like police helicopters or fire or whatnot, please do not fly your drones. Still, it's a fun thing to do. In a post very succinctly titled Solar Node by user ThisGI, they built a birdhouse with dual solar panels and a little cute chimney for the antenna. And I know we've seen birdhouse Meshtastic nodes before. The major difference with this is that the user ThisGI 3D printed this birdhouse, and they included all the files on printables.com. Of course, if you're going to replicate this, please use ASA for durability in the sun. I have a Dove family who has set up shop on top of one of my security cameras on my house. If I had a 3D printed birdhouse, maybe they would be leaving my security cameras alone. The next one on the list from Reddit is titled LoRa32 V4 samples are on the way by Heltec Automation 6. I mentioned last month that the LoRa32 was getting a V4. Now we have pictures of samples being sent off to testers. The only major bit of news from this thread is that it looks like the official launch will be September 20th, or if not the official launch, they have promised more information. At this point, there is still nothing more about the details on this particular unit. So the final social post for today is titled Solar Flagpole Repeater by Personal Fee 7274. And they have a flagpole in their yard, and they have a round solar light on top. They hacked a rack whiz block into the guts of that solar light. They wired it up so it siphons power off the main solar panel, but uses its own battery, which is very smart since most of those solar lights don't last that long. And if you actually needed this, you would hate to have your node go dead because your flag was lit up. Although if you are hoisting an American flag, flag code says that if it's up overnight, it must be lit. Fun fact. I love this idea for twofold. One, I want a flagpole and have a flag in my front yard because I just think that's cool. I love seasonal flags. I unfortunately cannot convince my wife to let me put up a flagpole. But more importantly, height is might. And this is a great way to get a node up 20 or 30 feet that is super non-obvious because no one's going to look closely at that ring light thing that you have on top of your flagpole that it happens to have a little antenna sticking up. Especially if it's a fairly short antenna, it may be very non-noticeable. I just think this is another in the line of really cool ways to build a very subtle mesh network that is disaster resilient and has the height. With that, I want to say thank you very much for listening all the way into the very end of our September episode of Voice of the Mesh. My goal is to try and get these out a little bit earlier in the month, but this month I was writing an article that will hopefully feature Meshtastic and be in Make Magazine. We shall see. Additionally, it has been suggested to me to interview Mesh communities. So if you happen to be part of building out a Mesh community somewhere and would like to be featured on Voice of the Mesh, would like to talk about your Mesh and the cool things you've done and why you're unique and what interesting things you've done, because every Mesh I've been to is unique and different, and I love it, and I want to talk to you all. Please feel free to hit me up on all the usual channels. Or if you just have general suggestions or ideas of things that you would like to hear, like interviews with community meshes, leave your tips or suggestions, whatnot, via Blue Sky, Discord, YouTube comments, hell, smoke signals. If you're in the Bay Area, you could use Meshtastic. But of course, you're a subscriber, so we will see you back here next month. Until then, stay meshing.